Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of a Amber collection, Hammond collection kind of review retrospective tier list thing. Um, I have been collecting the Amber collection figures and now the Hammond collection figures for the dinosaurs at least. I plan to collect everything for the Hammond collection, but for the Amber collection, I skipped a lot of the humans. Um, and near the end, I changed my mind on that and started to try to grab them, and then they canceled the Amber collection line. I was like, I guess we won't get the rest of the humans. So I'm not going to review the humans, just the dinosaurs. And I also haven't bothered picking up every Raptor repaint. I skipped the Raptor squad because I don't like the Raptor squad that much in general, unfortunately. So, Blue, Charlie, Delta Echo, skipped them all. So we're only going to go over the figures I actually have on hand and evaluate those and rank them here. A little bit about me and my history with dinosaur figures. I was super into the Kenner figures when I was a kid. Jurassic Park hit when I was 7. Perfect age to just be completely obsessed with the Kenner figures for quite a while. That continued into the Lost World, and I had a lot of figures from that too. So that was kind of the gold standard for figures for me. Was the Kenner lines. Still have huge nostalgia for them. I did sell all my pieces when I was a teenager because I needed money for cards, for magic cards. So unfortunately my whole collection was lost. I did pick some stuff up as a grown ass man on eBay and from thrift stores and stuff to kind of rebuild a little bit of a collection. I haven't gone crazy buying everything from Kenner, but I've got a few different things floating around. There's like a Triceratops behind me, and so on. Um, I pretty much stopped paying attention to the figures with Jurassic Park 3. The Hasbro stuff was dog shit. JP3 figures, there was some okay stuff in there, um, but a lot of them were pretty bad. I hated everything that had just like the open gaping wounds on them without the Kenner style flesh covers. The little plugs you could put on dinosaurs to cover up the wounds. I can't really point too well to the trike. I'm not going to grab him. And when they removed that, it was just dumb. And then the Jurassic World figures were really, really bad. Really exceptionally awful. The Mattel figures have been a mixed bag, I think. Their paint jobs are really shit, generally. Some of them are fine. Um, but yeah, the normal Mattel line, there's some dinosaur sculpts that I don't think are very good and I've never liked. I've been disappointed continuously by their Carnotauruses. None of them have ever been up to my standards, so I never bothered grabbing any of them. I always wanted a good Herrerasaurus, and I don't like the Herrerasaurus either. I picked up a few things, like some of their like kind of mid-sized figures are pretty decent. Like the Ceratosaurus is pretty good. The Sinoceratops, the Anki figure sculpt is pretty good. The Anmonosaurus is fine. But I generally haven't bought too many of them. I got the Brachii and the Apato, of course. Their sauropods are pretty great. But I mean, just the fact that we got like even a reasonably scaled Brachiosaurus figure blew my goddamn mind because that was something that we never had from Kenner. Um, so that was a huge nostalgia moment of finally getting that thing that I'd wanted since I was 7. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel generally broadly about the Jurassic Park action figure history here. So obviously, as a grown-ass man who's just looking at stuff he can put on a shelf, collector figures are much more compelling. So the Amber collection definitely was pretty exciting when they announced that. That started with the JP1 Raptor, and maybe Blue was in that line too. I don't really remember. Like I said, I never picked up the Raptor Squad figures. And then they moved on to do some other stuff, and they came out with basically everything you'd see here by the end. The top 2 rows is Amber collection. And then the Amber collection was scrapped, and now they're doing the Hammond collection, which is a smaller line. There's definitely upsides and downsides switching from the bigger figures to the smaller figures. I like the fact that we can get different size dinosaurs and scale with each other from the Hammond collection lines. That definitely is exciting to me. We've already got that with the Raptor and the Para and the Bary, 2 large and 1 small figure. I mean, I would have killed for an Amber collection scale Rex or Trike, but that was never going to probably happen. So we end up. I'm pretty okay with the switch to Hammond collection, just to get that scaling in there. So why don't we start talking about the figures? We could talk about the Amber Collection figures chronologically. I think I'm not going to do that quite in that order. I think we'll save the Raptors for last and talk about them, because then we can talk about the Hammond Collection Raptor in comparison to the Amber Collection. So let's start with probably the crown jewel of the Amber Collection in my mind, the Dilophosaurus. We're going to throw this straight into S tier. It's an exceptionally great figure. I have my Dilo right here. It's got the open frill. It's got the closed frill. You can switch between the two. It's got, as you can see in the little tier list figure here, it could have this little spit thing that you put in its mouth that can have it, have the spit coming out. You get the awesome two-tone body color with the like white outlining the black stripe. In terms of my figure, I have a loose tail joint, which is rather unfortunate and does ruin the profile of the figure a little bit, where the tail either droops or has to be stuck up. And there's no compromise in the middle because it's too loose to actually hold it straight. It always droops. Very disappointing. Also, weak ankle joint. Not super weak, but weak enough that over time the figure slowly droops. So I have him sitting on his arm here. Also, pretty loose arm joint. So that's all a bit disappointing with how poor the joints on this figure unfortunately came out to be. Still very happy with it overall. The accessories, the open closed frill, the spit, and it comes with the little dock sign that Nedry hits at the Jeep as well. The accessories are really nice. Figure looks great proportion wise. It looks good from the front, good from the side. There's maybe a little bit of weird stuff with the underside of the frill. Not sure how well I can get that on camera. There's a little bit of like a seam running in there right next to my thumb. There's a little bit of kind of flash hanging off the plastic on the underside a little bit. You can see kind of some other pieces of flash on different parts of it, like right on the side of the body a little bit. Yeah, like on his knee, there's a bunch of stuff kind of there too. If you can see that, a bunch of stuff on the knee. But it's not bad. Certainly great. I mean, it's a better rendition of the Dilo than we've ever had before. It beats out the Kenner Dilos, which are pretty solid in my mind. The squeeze body spitter Dilo from Kenner is not the best rendition of the Dilophosaurus in terms of accuracy, but it's a pretty iconic Dilo figure. So I think he belongs solidly on the upper echelons of S tier. It's a good figure. I think we'll jump straight to another S tier figure, the Pteranodon. I'm not terribly fond of the JP3 Pteranodon in general. I don't like the teeth. The toothy Pteranodon design from JP3 does not do it for me. But I cannot deny that this is an exceptionally beautiful figure. The thing that really sets this apart from other pterosaur figures we've had is the wing membrane. The wing is soft plastic that can be bent. There's a wire in here so you can style the wings. And then the membrane itself is soft plastic, which really captures like the feel of a pterosaur wing and the look of a pterosaur wing. It's got sculpted in like veins and stuff. It's got this detailed paint job all over the whole figure. It's really good. Feet and legs look a little weird, but pterosaur feet and legs kind of always look a little bit weird. And just the fact that the wing membrane actually connects to the body is super cool. It actually looks like a pterosaur wing as opposed to like a weird piece of solid plastic. Like when we get to the dimorphodon for comparison, the dimorphodon has these solid wings with this gap between the body and the wing, which stands out. So this is really nice. Good joints, good mobility. You've got a shoulder joint. You've got multiple joints in the feet, the ankle, the knee. The feet move, rotate, and swivel. There's all sorts of stuff going on there. The jaw opens and closes. You got these multiple body joints and neck joints. The head can rotate around a few different axes. Yeah, this little joint in the body too. Mine, once again, has loose joints. The jaw is pretty loose here. And unfortunately, one of the wings is loose, which means you can never like just put it in a soaring pose and have it like this hanging from a string or something, or from the little platform that they come with, because the wing will always droop. and there's nothing I can do about it. And that sucks. I think the pteranodon and the Dilophosaurus are the two best figures in the Amber Collection line, and they're the two figures I have that have bad joints on them. Is that bad luck, or was that a quality control issue with that section of the line? Those kind of came out. I think they might have came out one wave after the other. So that might have been a quality control issue at that time for those waves. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think those figures have the best paint jobs out of the Amber Collection line, the most accurate and just the most detailed and interesting. And it's just too bad that the joints on both of mine are subpar. Still, they're S tier figures. Even if the joints are a little bit loose on the entire production line or something, you still really can't beat those figures in terms of detail and accuracy and paint job and everything. Next, let's talk about the dimorphodon, the other pterosaur we got from the line. This was a 2-pack. You get the soaring version and then the landed version with the folded wings. The wings are always folded. These are hard plastic with a shoulder joint. So there's very little you can do with these. This dimorphodon pretty much just sits on the ground like this, and every other pose would be ridiculous with the wings being the way they are. He's got a decent sculpt, not the most detailed, but he has this hairy back. We've got some texture on the wings. The wings are nicely painted with this orangish, veiny texture that the dimorphodons have. Head sculpts are a little weird in my mind. The dimorphodon head is weird in general, but the teeth here are really strange with the way they interlock. It makes it look really awkward and weird when the mouth is open, really artificial and strange. So I don't really like that too much. There's a lot less joints going on here. You can't style the wings. We've got an ankle joint but no knee joint, so the limbs are always bent like this. The jaw moves and the head swivels up and down. Does it have a side-to-side ball joint in here? It does. So it's side-to-side and then up and down on the head. And then the jaw opens and closes. Probably look a little bit better with their mouths closed, because then the teeth are a little less weird looking when they're properly interlinked. But they always look weird because you can see those weird sockets where the teeth kind of match each other. The paint job's a little weird in that the one has gray beige wings and the other one has orange wings, but then the heads are completely identical. I'm not sure what the idea there is, why they paint the wings slightly different and only that. Maybe that actually is something from the film. You just don't notice it because the dimorphodon is not very noticeable in the film. No loose joints on these guys, so that's pretty good. Not too much else to say about the dimorphodons. It's not a very beloved species by any means, but it is a solid little pterosaur figure. I think we can put him in A tier. I think that's still a pretty good figure. I think the teeth are the most jarring feature of the figure, and part of that is down to just the dimorphodon's design itself. But the way they interlock, and there's these gaps for the teeth to slot together to close the jaw, it just looks weird. It looks like a toy. It doesn't look like a real creature's teeth. So I think that's the biggest knock against it. And then just the fact that it's the dimorphodon, and it's just not a terribly exciting figure. I think that puts it down to A. So, since we're leaving the Raptors for last, now we got to get into the dregs of the Amber Collection, unfortunately. Two disappointments that came packaged together, the young T-Rex and the Compies. So, I'm not going to rank these immediately. Let's talk about them first. The young T-Rex figure has decent articulation and decent accessories coming with the belt muzzle and the cast here that you can put on his leg. The problems I have with this figure come down to 3 things, but maybe 4 we can talk about. 1, you can see a pretty significant chunk of flash sitting on his shoulder here, coming right off the top. Could probably trim it off, sure. But it'd be nice if the quality control would do that for me and I wouldn't have to try and trim off this excess flash from the plastic mold myself. 2, the packaging on this figure was atrocious. Borderline unforgivable. Look at this tail. This is a soft tail with a wire in it. The wire in the tail extends down to the exact point where this tail bends to the side sharply from how it was packaged. I've tried to put a little bit of a bend in the tail here to compensate for that a little bit so it looks a little less weird. But yeah, basically the tail came smushed against the side of the box, which put this permanent 90-degree angle into it, to the point where the wire wants to poke through the end of the tail because the wire comes right to this sharp corner, and the other side here has these like curves and almost damage to the plastic, to the rubber or whatever, from the sharp curve that's in that. And that's damn near unforgivable. The Amber Collection packaging is the same for every dinosaur figure. It's a huge box because it fits, the full Dilo or the Raptor. So why in the world was the Rex package with his tail smushed against the side? Just move it forward in the box. There's plenty of space. Why? It's so that's like the most disappointing aspect of the figure is that they ruin the tail in the packaging process. Also have a big chunk of flash on the back of the knee here hanging out of the joint. You see that? Look at that. Gross. Really need to try and fix that and trim that off maybe. But also, it's not a phenomenal figure anyway. The joints are pretty okay on this guy. Nothing that's loose, really. The cast doesn't really sit on the ankle decently. It's pretty janky, too. What else? The other big thing here, I think there's problems with the sculpt, and there's definitely problems with the paint job. This guy is like bright pea neon grotesque green, and it is not good. It is not a good color for him. If we look at the actual Baby Rex, this is a behind the scenes image, and it is fairly green, but it's much more of an earthy green and not this like gross pea green that looks really weird and jarring. It reminds me a lot of like the JP3 Rex, which is much greener than like the Buck from Lost World. And the Baby Rex from Lost World very much echoes the color scheme of the Buck. And this doesn't really capture that. I think the proportions are weird. If you look at the little Rex here in the middle of the screen, he's kind of a little bit behind my camera. Let's move him up here. It looks to me like the body should be lengthened on the figure. Let's position this in the same kind of profile. So it looks to me like the torso's a little short and the neck's a little short. The neck should be kind of the same length as like the skull. So the neck should be lengthened out about like half again or so. And then the body, same kind of deal. The proportion of the arm's not bad. It's just like the arm should not reach like all the way back to the thigh like this, really. Like the arm should look like it should reach just barely to the thigh as opposed to the middle of it like this. So that's a little off. Yeah. I mean, the accessories are pretty nice, but it's just not quite right in other ways. There's also these weird stripes on the neck. If you look at that, there's like this single stripe that comes down underneath the jaw that reaches all the way across the neck, and it looks really weird. It's on both sides. It's just that one stripe that like gets into the underbelly color. It just doesn't look right. It looks like the paint ran, kind of, but it's on both sides, so it must be intentional. But then if you look at the shoulders from the front, I don't know if you can see that, there's this stripe right here that also continues above the arm socket onto the underbelly color, and that's not present on this side. So I'm wondering if there's some paint application issues on this figure too, where the paint application is not quite correct and kind of ran a little bit on that. Yeah, not sure about that one. I think for the packaging issue alone with the tail, this figure loses points. This was a problem Kenner had with some figures too, but they were the large figures, like the Buck T-Rex, where that thing was enormous, a huge figure, so it's understandable that the tail gets bent over in the packaging a little bit. It sucks, but it's more understandable. This thing came in a box that was way bigger than it. Had no reason for the tail to be bent. Just, unforgivable in my mind. Easily the most disappointing figure from the whole Amber collection line, I think. It's not the worst figure, but as a figure that officially disappoints me, it has to be no higher than C tier. I mean, my mind here kind of is that like S and A tier are pretty exceptional. B tier is like the standard, like base level, like this is the least you could do kind of, and then C and D are actively disappointing. So I'm gonna put the baby Rex Junior into C. The sculpt seems a little bit off. In terms of proportions, the paint job is bad. The packaging is atrocious. And in terms of the accessories, it comes with the compies. Now these compies are pretty bad too. They're a small figure, of course, so I don't expect much for articulation or anything, but the legs move and the jaw moves, and that's about it. And honestly, the fact that they made the jaw move is just detrimental to the figure. This jaw sucks. Look at how bad that looks. The underbite is insane. There's like this huge gap on this side between the jaw and the rest of the figure. Like the jaw is basically crooked in terms of like the sculpting. It's got this really bad Jay Leno look to it. Like, they would have been much better off if they would have just not had the jaw open. It was just a solid piece for the head sculpt. The head is way oversized. Like, yeah. You get stripes on the back at least. But it's not great. The figure has no balance whatsoever. Like, I can balance it on my hand, but only because my hand is, like, not a flat surface. On a flat surface, this thing just tips forward. You have to go all the way up, like, in this, like, begging posture to get it to sit flat on a flat surface without tipping over, which looks bad. You get 3 of them, and they look essentially the same. The legs aren't even rigidly attached to the body. They just pop in and out. They're just, like, on little pegs that just slot in. They're bad. They're not good. These do not belong in the Amber collection. They would have been better off with a solid piece of plastic that just didn't look like crap instead of this like poor attempt at trying to put articulation on this little guy. I like the compies too, so this is honestly more disappointing to me than the Rex. If this figure just came with good little compies, I would have been freaking happy. I just want some good compies. We've got the Kenner compy that came with Dieter Stark, which is pretty decent, but it's in a fixed pose that has it pouncing on somebody. It's not a naturalistic pose that you can just put in like a diorama or something and have it look like anything. So I'm pretty disappointed. I'm going to put them in D tier. I think they're the worst thing out of the whole line. Those copies are not good. Next, let's talk about the Raptors. So the original Amber Collection figure that started the whole line is this Raptor. It's one of, I believe, 8 Amber Collection Raptors using all the same or primarily the same sculpt. Because there's 2 versions of the JP1. There's the Lost World Tiger Stripe Raptor, which is the only other version I own. They did a JP3 male, and they did the Raptor Squad. So that's 8 versions. I don't think they ever did a female for JP3, which feels weird that they skipped that. Pretty happy with this figure when it came out. It's not bad by any means. It's got movable toe claws, which is nice. That's pretty cool. It's got painted dew claws, actually, on the feet, which is amazing. It's even got the stripes on the tail. You can barely see these black stripes on the brown, but those are accurate to the JP Raptor. So that's pretty cool. I like seeing that. Feet feel maybe a little bit big. I think the thumb feels a little small on the hand. The first finger, the inner finger, feels really tiny compared to the others. It is smaller, but I think it's just a little bit too small. If we look at a behind-the-scenes picture of the JP Raptor, my camera's covering it here a little bit. in terms of the hand. I'll move it around in a second. Let's talk about the color scheme. The JP Raptor in the behind the scenes here has these dark stripes on the forearm, on the leg, on the thigh, the back, the neck, and the tail. All you get on this figure is stripes on the tail. I think it's a really missed opportunity to give this figure like the full behind the scenes color scheme, which would have looked really good. Head sculpt looks pretty good, I think. You get kind of these bumps on the back of the head that I think are decently present here. If we slide you over a little bit, yeah, I think that looks pretty decent. You're looking at the fingers, you can see that this middle finger is shorter, but it looks like it should be like half the length of the big finger in the middle, whereas this is like less than half. I think it should be probably like another solid finger joint long. Like the claw probably, the end of the finger probably should be where the end of the claw is, and then the claw should be coming off of where, you know, off of that. So it should be another little like centimeter longer or so. Not a deal breaker or anything, just not quite what it ought to be, I think. Yeah, I think if they would have captured this color scheme perfectly or much closer to it, I would have ranked this like higher for sure. But it's not a bad figure by any means. Oh yeah, I was talking about the fingers, and you can't see it because it's behind my camera. Here, you can see this finger is shorter compared to the longer finger, but you've got like basically the claw looks like it reaches down to like the second finger joint, like finger joint, finger joint, finger joint, as opposed to the figure itself where it reaches down just to like the first finger joint instead of the second. So it should be just that little bit longer. The feet, a bit oversized on the figure, but that's probably partially down to figure stability, getting them to stand in place decently. They're not so oversized on this figure, just a little bit big. Yeah, I don't think there's too much else to talk about. I mean, this is an iconic design. I really like the JP1 and 2 Raptors. So they could have done a little bit better. I think I'm going to put it in A tier. I think it's still a pretty damn good Raptor figure. It's the original version of the figure, too. So then I'm going to put ahead of the Dimorphodon in A tier. The other version we have is the Tiger Stripe version. It's the exact same sculpt, just a different paint job. Obviously the Tiger Stripe. If we pull up an example of the actual Raptor here, let's put him over here a little bit so he's not blocked by the camera. We can compare a little bit the details. One, the eye on this guy is gold. The eye is very distinctly yellow in the Lost World. Why did they paint his eye gold? It looks very unnatural. It should be like a vivid yellow. Gold makes it look like a jewel or some crap. It's not a natural color choice. Two, the stripes kind of feel like they didn't reference the creature at all, really. And they just painted some stripes on it. Maybe getting an accurate rendition of all the striping would be too much to ask, but it just doesn't quite feel right. I think the stripes, it looks to me like the stripes should get pretty close running down the spine too and not be discrete stripes over the entire back of the creature. It's a little hard to tell. I feel like the shade on this figure should be a little lighter in the orange and a little darker on the stripes, or maybe just one or the other. Like if the orange color on the back here was a little bit lighter, it'd make the stripes pop a little bit more, which might look a little bit better. These are relatively nitpicky. This version of my Tiger Stripe Raptor does have a little bit of weak ankles, so he tends to slowly tip forward over time, at least when the room's hot. It's not so bad, but I do keep him in more of a crouching pose, kind of leaning on his hand here because of that. Yeah, we've already talked about the sculpt, so the same problems persist. You can see here again the fingers, where the size difference from this finger versus the other shouldn't be quite so egregious, I don't think. It's not that much shorter than the outermost finger, whereas the difference is pretty significant here in this figure. Yeah, I think maybe the underside should be a little whiter. There's a lot of orange that shows through. Maybe the base color of the figure itself is more orange, which is why the white doesn't quite work. Actually, if you look in the hole in the bottom of the figure, it looks like the base color is this creamy, like off-white. So they could have just maybe done a white color that was a little bit more distinctive. The dew claws aren't painted on this one. They paint the dew claws on the original, but not the repaint. They just paint them over in orange. That's actually that's a knock on it a little bit. Yeah, I think I gotta rank it lower. I think the paint job is probably a little less accurate. The unpainted dew claw is a little bit of a corner cut. I think they could have done better. I think they kind of had to do better to justify the repaint a little bit, in my mind. I'm happy to have it. B tier is still acceptable. But yeah, I'm gonna put him in B. And that brings us to the end of the Amber collection. So this is my final tier ranking for the Amber collection figures. We kind of got an entry on every level we can have here. So let's switch over to talking about the Hammond collection, the new line that just launched. I managed to snag all 4 of the first wave figures from my local Target. They had 1 Barry and 1 Para, and I managed to snatch them up. But we're going to talk about the Raptor first. So, the Raptor looks primarily like a scaled-down version of the Amber Collection Raptor, with even bigger clown shoes to support the smaller scale figure. And a little bit of the articulation's been lost. The toe claw doesn't move now. There's no wrist joints. But these are understandable things. The hands still have that really small first finger. So kind of the same sculpt issues from the other figure. There's a little bit of weird stuff going on with paint here on these fingers. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little bit of a white mark on the one hand. And then the other hand has like a corresponding dark mark, which is really weird. Might be a little bit of flash on the one hand and then a little bit of misapplied paint on the other. Very strange. Something about the head sculpt looks a little more sinister, which is nice. The jaw does open, but it looks really bad when it opens. So definitely keep this one closed. It's actually interesting that this one closes much better than the big figure does. The big figure jaw actually can't close all the way, whereas this one can, which I think lends it that more sinister air a little bit of the kind of fully closed, like sneering look versus the jaw hanging open on the big figure. I like that. I think that's interesting. It sets it apart from the larger figure in at least one way. It still has a bendable tail on this kind of swivel socket joint. So that's nice that they keep that detail. I think there's another thing this figure does better than the bigger one, and that's the paint job. I'm not sure how well this will show up on the camera, but you can actually see striping on the thigh, and the upper level of the back has this darker painted coat that's more distinct than the brown beneath it, which actually does kind of capture the striping. If we bring back the big picture, does kind of capture that striping of the actual creature a little bit better than the bigger figure does, surprisingly. The bigger figure has much more blending to it, which is actually less accurate, I think. I think it looks a little bit more accurate if the colors are less blended. Getting that darker brown is a little bit more distinct layer of coloring. And like I mentioned before, I do like the smaller scale because it allows us to get more dinosaurs in more of a scale with each other. I hadn't thought about this too much before, but I think I like this better than the larger scale Raptor. I think the colors pop a little bit more. I mean, it's got its own share of problems with the feet, for sure. But I think it's a pretty damn good small scale Raptor. I think it's probably the best JP1 Raptor figure we've had. I guess another consideration to make is the front profile of the skull. The big raptor has more of a boxy skull, whereas the little one has a little bit more of a flattened skull. It's a little wider than it is taller compared to the first one. That's interesting. I'm not sure how inaccurate that is. We can't really tell on this picture, nor on that one. I think it should be. I think the smaller figure is more inaccurate, but it's not so bad that it's awful. Yeah, I'm gonna rank the small one ahead. Honestly, I think the paint job is just better enough. It looks just more detailed, that more distinctive, that I actually do like it. Next, we'll talk about the crown jewel of the Hammond line, which actually kind of surprised me a little bit. The Baryonyx. I'll rank him here, and then we'll discuss him. I think I'm going to put him behind the Dilo and ahead of the pteranodon. Honestly, phenomenal figure, so good. Lots of joints. Legs move, knees move, ankles move, the feet twist around. We've got painted toe claws, finger claws, dew claw unpainted. We've got the actual like colorization of the Baryonyx. We've got the little bit of like blue around the eye socket. They've actually done that. We've got the dark blue on the top, the gray with like the whiter stripe in between the two regions on the body. Really nice, really good effort, really good job. You even got the underbelly painted kind of a different color too. You've got the sculpt is phenomenal. Like the level of detail on this thing. You've got all the individual scoots along the back, the belly scoots. It's so good. The muscle definition in like the legs, the arms. You got the longer front fingers for the Baryonyx. You know, you get the wide Fallen Kingdom Baryonyx skull, of course, because it's the Fallen Kingdom Baryonyx, which is accurate to the film, not to the real animal. Yeah, you've got a great range of motion in the head. You've got swivel joints. Everything moves. Mine's a little loose, but if a joint's going to be loose, the head joint is a good one to be loose because it doesn't support so much weight. Like if the legs are loose, the figure falls over, and the legs are good. The head is loose, but it's not so loose that it can't be posed. So there's a good range of poses that it actually will hold, even though the joints do seem fairly loose. Like you can shake it and the head will move a little bit, but when you're not shaking it, it's fairly stable. No wrist joints, but dinosaurs don't have very mobile wrists anyway, so that's perfectly fine. The tail is soft material with a wire again, so you can pose it. I don't want to do that too much. It looks good straight, and I don't want to mess up the paint. Don't want to risk that flaking off. Yeah, good figure. If I'm going to complain about anything, let's pick some nits. I think the middle toe claw on this foot looks a little bent. Packaging issue maybe? Sculpting issue? Who knows? I'm really picking at some little nits here. There's a few little paint application issues, like on the tail here, there's a little bit of spot on the stripe that's up on one of like the scoots that's higher than it ought to be. When we get down to the tip of the tail, you can see where the armoring on the top and the paint application don't match. So you get the armoring, the texturing coming off of the paint down into the gray, where it probably should be the blue, the dark blue of the top of the tail. We've got, again, a pretty consistent issue with Mattel figures here. Issues with flash on the plastic or the rubber. There's a little nub here that kind of sticks off the figure. Could try to clip it off. Oh, I just pulled it off there. Great, that looks better already. But, you know, that kind of stuff probably should be dealt with on quality control, I would say, personally. Maybe. There's also little other issues like specks of paint that seem to be off position on like the bottom. There's like a little bit of something there. There's like this seam in this thigh here has little bits of paint missing inside of it where the application doesn't quite reach all the way down into the crack. This side looks a little bit better. None of these are deal breakers. It's still like an S tier figure. Really good. Really good stuff. There's a little bit of a weird thing going on here next to this head sculpt where the paint on the neck where the neck and the skull connect here at the top is a little bit weird. Like the paint's missing a little bit, rubbed off maybe by the head joint. I think the top of the head is supposed to open, and mine is frozen in place. I don't want to mess with that, so I can only move the bottom jaw. But I'm fine with that. There's enough mobility here that I could display it in any way I care to. So I'm not going to risk breaking anything by trying to loosen up that upper jaw. It means the jaw only opens this far, but I think that's actually pretty reasonable opening depth for a figure like this. So I'm not even counting that as a complaint. Eyes look good. There's a little bit of flash on the underside of the jaw, a little bit of stray plastic hanging off of it there. There's a little bit of a weird spot on the side of the snout. Minor stuff. You can just headcanon it as scars or something when you're displaying the figure. But yeah, definitely the crown jewel of the launch of the Hammond collection line. And not what I thought was going to be the crown jewel. I thought the exceptional figure was going to be the Parasaur. But it's not. And that's disappointing. Let's get the big problem with this figure out of the way. And I mean a big fat problem. And it's this head sculpt. Holy shit, that head is fat as fuck. It looks good from the side. It looks great from the side. Which is why the figure, I thought, looked like it was going to be a freaking godsend seeing pictures on the internet. But in person, because of how thick that neck joint is, it doesn't hold up as well. You got to display it from the side, then it still looks okay. Let's talk about other problems. The paint, or the tail, just has a single stripe on it on each side. Just the two stripes across the top. The rest of it's unpainted. There's a little bit of a weird nub hanging off the side here, probably from where the wire goes in the tail. The tail is soft rubber. It is got a bendy wire in the middle. It feels a little short as well. The paint job on this guy, this is supposed to be the Lost World Parasaur, but this feels very Jurassic World. The feet feel a little fat too, side to side, a little wide, a little cartoony. There's also a bunch of gaps in the paint job on the stripes, on the thighs, where they're not getting paint in the cracks here, really. Same kind of with the white stripe on the body. Those cracks kind of show through. Eye looks pretty nice. The jaw opens, but it looks very unnatural when it's opened very far. So I think it looks best closed or just slightly ajar like this. By no means a bad figure. I think I rank it probably as a high B. So still a good figure overall. But I am disappointed compared to the way it looked initially online. I'm not sure where this speckling on the side of the body comes from either. This brown patterning. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be some attempt at having some highlight scales or something. Really not clear to me. Another thing to compare this one to, in my mind, is the gold standard for previous Parasaurs from Jurassic franchise, which is the Kenner Lost World Parasaur. So if we compare the two of them, they've got fairly different head sculpts in terms of size and shape and style, while the bodies here are actually almost exactly the same size. From tip to tail, through the body and up to the head was where it really changes. Arm length is about the same. The leg length is about the same. So they are very similar. Very good comparison. The paint job on the Mattel figure is more detailed, probably. But I think the Kenner figure does have a few advantages. One, the Kenner figure is painted all the way down to the tip of the tail here with this double stripe. And we can actually pull up some concept art for the para from Lost World. And if we look at that, we can see that the stripes on the tail, it should have two stripes on the side of the tail that come down and merge at the tip. And the Mattel figure has nothing like that. So the tail's wrong on the Mattel figure. The leg stripes on the Kenner figure merge in the back into a single stripe with these branches, whereas the Mattel figure stripes are separate. So that looks more accurate to me, the Mattel figure. Neither one really catches this patch of white above the leg on the concept art for the para. I think the head coloration's better on the Kenner figure, and the sculpt of the head on the Kenner figure is way better in general. It doesn't look like a big fat weird thing from the front. I really like the way the Kenner neck just comes up and merges seamlessly with the skull. You don't have this big bulbous joint, which is because there's a joint in the Hammond collection figure that's not present in the Kenner figure. I would have preferred that. I would have preferred no head motion just to get a better sculpt for it. I'm not sure if the patterning on the horn here is correct. I never thought about that, but yeah, not too sure. You don't really get a good look at the patterning of the para in the film itself because it's on that dusty game trail scene, and it's hard to see. Interestingly, they have different amounts of fingers. The Mattel para, I'm not sure how well you can see that, has 5 fingers, and then the Kenner one only has 4. Which is interesting. Kenner, better feet. I don't know if I said that already. I think the feet look much more natural. I think the shape looks better. The foot on the para here looks really weird. And actually, if you look at the top of the foot, the toes are much deeper than they are on the bottom of the foot. Maybe gives it an intentional little bit of a web foot design, but it looks awkward and weird. I think the Admontosaurus figure from the base Mattel line has much better feet than this para does, which is strange. Yeah, so I think the true rendition of the Lost World para or the franchise para in general lies somewhere between these two figures, honestly. I think the Kenner head sculpt is better. I think the Kenner foot is better. And the Kenner paint job on the tail is better, too, for sure, with the double stripe. But the Kenner figure completely lacks the white stripe between the 2 dark stripes on the spine. And the red stripe going down the back of the para is pretty distinctive looking, but it's not exactly accurate to its depiction of it in the Lost World so much. It looks a little bit more like the depiction of it in Jurassic World. I'm okay with having that there, though. It's not bad. Interestingly, the stripes on the arms are entirely different between these two figures, too. With the cross stripes on the Mattel figure and the single stripe running down the arm on the Kenner figure. Strange difference in detail. I think the color is probably a little bit better on the Kenner figure. The base beige color over the more yellow Mattel figure. But it's not a bad figure altogether. So yeah, B tier I think is where that belongs. If the head sculpt was better, if it wasn't so fat, and maybe oversized a little bit too, if it was a little bit better in that regard, I would put it solidly into A tier. But the head, unfortunately, which one picture was it here? Unfortunately, just doesn't quite work. And yeah, the head does look like it's a little too long too in comparison to the concept art. The head should be maybe a little smaller, horn a little bigger in proportion to the rest of the skull. More like it is in the Kenner figure. I always gotta like invert this because the camera's inverted or whatever. Well, when I see my camera, the feed from it, it's inverted from my perspective versus how I hold the thing. I have to think about it every time. But yeah, not bad. Certainly the best para Mattel's given us. I think I rank the overall sculpt of the Kenner figure ahead of the Mattel figure, but the Kenner figure has the problem of the legs being unposable with this running mechanic, unfortunately, which is really awkward and really damages like the display ability of the figure. The tail is below the feet when the feet are held level, which is a really unfortunate flaw of the Kenner figure. I wonder if you could break this and move the legs forward. So you got to kind of display the Kenner figure in this awkward, like 1 foot pose. So I think Mattel wins over Kenner just barely then, for the fact that you can easily display the new para, and you can't easily display the Kenner para. But the Kenner para does look more naturalistic. The head is leagues above it, so it's not a one like it's not a clear winner in either case. Each of them has their own respective strengths. So I think we can call this the complete tier list. This is still a win overall. Both the Amber Collection and the Hammond Collection so far are great lines. Amber Collection only really let us down in the end with that Babyrex release. By and large, I consider most of the figures in both lines to be good to exceptional. And all I'm really hoping for here from these figures is good anyway. So I'm happy with the Raptors. Happy with the Parasaurs. Exceptionally happy with the Dilo and the Barry. Like, really good stuff. So as long as we keep getting some stuff on the quality of, A to S tier with some B tier stuff thrown in, I'm happy, man. Just as long as we don't get a bunch more C, D tier jank. That'd be great. I intend to collect even the humans from the Hammond Collection line. Try and keep up on that line in a way that I didn't with Amber Collection properly. So maybe we'll see what those all look like someday. I've got Malcolm sitting back there behind me. You can't really see him because he's tiny, but he's next to the hunter killer underneath the Brachiosaurus. So yeah. I guess the thing I'd really hope for would be a nice big Carnotaurus figure that actually looks good for once. They can give me a Carnotaurus on the tier of the Baryonyx, an S tier Carnotaurus figure, maybe with the demon paint job, maybe for Dominion, maybe for Fallen Kingdom. I'll even take the regular Fallen Kingdom paint job. Just a good Carnotaurus sculpt, because I've never liked Mattel's Carnotaurs. Something always feels off with them. Mostly in the paint job, and not even the sculpt. Paint jobs just feel weird. But yeah, that's like my dream, is a good Carno. It'll be really exciting to see some of the other figures we got coming. We've got, a Rex, a full-size Rex, I think, coming for the Hammond Collection. Ceratosaurus, Gallimimus, Dilophosaurus. Maybe those are the other 4 dinos that have been announced. I don't remember if there's anything else beyond that. Then we got some other humans coming. Right now it's just Ian Malcolm. He's the only human they've released. I don't know why Malcolm is the first human to release for both JP and the Amber Collection and the Hammond Collection. I mean, I guess he's the most iconic character, but it's just strange just to have just the Malcolm figure out at the same time for both. I guess it was Malcolm and Grady for Amber Collection at the same time, I think. But nobody gives a shit about Owen Grady. I also think he was the only non-JP1 human character in the Amber Collection, which is really weird. Mostly focused on the first film's cast. Probably the first film nostalgia drove the sales of those figures. Although, is it really nostalgia when the first film is like the really exceptionally good one? It's not really nostalgia if it's correct, right? Well, I don't think I have anything else to say about these. I think that's our definitive little tier list. I think we're done here. So, yeah. Till next time. Till the next video. Till the next whatever we do.